I don't feel that by the end of the episode they were treating Rose as a character in her own right. There's been a lot of discourse about the Star Beast, and I wanted to throw in my little 2 cents. This video is going to be, as the thumbnail and title have given you the impression, it's going to be about representation, and specifically about the Star Beast, the first episode of the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. I'm not going to be talking about the infamous pronoun scene because I don't have a problem with that. That's perfectly fine. The thing that really bothers me is the lack of attention given to Rose Noble in this whole episode. And I'm going to talk about 1, what makes good representation, 2, how Rose was treated in this episode, and 3, how I would fix the episode itself. Now, queer representation has become more talked about in recent years, which is amazing. I love that. As a queer person myself, as a filmmaker, as a writer, it's amazing to see. And Doctor Who has been like at the front of it's been leading the charge since it came back in 2005 by the guidance of Russell T Davies, the returning showrunner. The Star Beast is the first episode of Russell returning as showrunner of Doctor Who. And I'll admit I had kind of high expectations, but after watching it twice, I was starting to see its flaws. Now, Russell T Davies is known to create queer content. He is the showrunner that brought Doctor Who back in 2005. He has also done shows like It's a Sin on Amazon Prime, which is amazing. Such a good show. I cried so hard. It's a lot. You should go watch it. It's amazing. But this episode, oh boy. Representation, to be clear, is not simply putting underrepresented groups of people on screen. That is the bare minimum. The absolute bare minimum. It is about giving these characters the same respect as the characters that have held this space forever. The same space, the same respect as cis-het, white, privileged characters. The same attention. That's what good representation is. Characters need to have dimension. They need to have character arcs to the same degree as the other characters. Now I know the last 2 videos I've gone in depth with how little Doctor Who pays attention to character arcs, but that's not the point either. Now I'm going to focus on queer representation because that's the form of representation that I can personally speak to. I am also going to say that I do not personally identify as trans or non-binary, so I'm going to leave creators down in the comments that are part of that community that you should check out. And yes, I'm not an authority on this. These are just my opinions and my thoughts on how the writing could have handled Rose's character better. Now, there are a few things that make representation actually good. It is not just putting characters into a story. That won't cut it anymore. That is, I'm not even sure you can call that the bare minimum. That's just like something else. We've moved past that section. Like, get on with it. We need more. And when writing underrepresented groups of people into your stories, a lot needs to be taken into account. There's so much history to do with different groups of people, especially in regards to how they're represented in media. There's the sexualization of queer women. There's like making queer characters into villains. There's so many different areas of media that have basically twisted caricatures of queer people into these like flat versions of a whole community. One of the best examples of good representation in recent years is the show Heartstopper, another show with Yasmin Finney. Now Heartstopper, if you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what you're doing. If you're on my channel, you probably have watched Heartstopper. So Heartstopper walks a balance of having the sexualities of the characters be kind of front and center of the story. Like, it is the focus of the story, but at the same time, it's not everything about the characters. You get storylines that cover their sexualities, but at the same time, they are formed as whole people. They're also able to talk about their sexualities in a way that doesn't seem preachy or, as people like to say about this episode, woke. Doctor Who has done this well in the past with characters like Captain Jack Harkness, River Song, and Clara Oswald, who all are queer characters, but it isn't their sexualities that define their characters. It's only like one trait of their identity. We get so much more out of their characters because of their overall character arcs. Often their sexualities, especially with River and Clara, their sexualities are just kind of like thrown in as throwaway lines, which granted is not like great because it's just like, it's random, but also it is a form of representation that is good to see because it means that they just exist. They're just there. They don't need to make a big deal of it because it isn't a big deal to the people around them. If you want to write queer characters for your stories, I want you to answer a few questions. First off, I want you to think of what kind of story you want to tell. Is the queer identity of these characters the main point of the story, or is it something in the background that can be mentioned? Is it queer focused, or is it simply a story that has queer characters in it? This is something I found the special struggled with because they seem to not know what kind of role Rose was going to play in the story. Rose's queer identity became very front and center during the special, and the scene I want to highlight is the reveal scene where it's shown that Rose inherited some of the meta-crisis. My big problem with this scene is that it paints Rose's queer identity as only a part of her identity because of her connection with the Doctor. By the end, Rose became more of a vessel for exposition to tell us exactly what the Doctor's identity is. Rose's identity is never really made fully clear in the episode, and it's even more confusing as we get closer to the end. We have the introduction of Rose Noble, Donna Noble's daughter, and she is introduced as a trans teen, and later on it's also revealed that she's non-binary. And I know this is my own undereducated cisgender brain. I had to do research because I am personally so used to encountering non-binary people who use they them pronouns. I was baffled when everyone was referring to Rose with she her pronouns, and then we have the reveal that Rose is non-binary, which wasn't actually told to us at any other point than this one line, and my brain was like, huh? I wouldn't find this as such a writing issue if we had been told about Rose's identity as a non-binary person earlier in the episode, if it didn't feel like such a random scene, random factoid that doesn't really add anything. This is my big scene that I have a problem with, okay? We're gonna dive into it because it really annoys me. And I don't see a lot of people talking about it. People talk about the pronoun scene, they talk about the let it go scene, but they do not talk about this scene, and I don't understand why, because it's so weird to me. This whole scene basically erases Rose's queer identity. We have the reveal that Rose is non-binary, which, cool, yeah, love that. But I think it would have been even better if we actually had them mention this at some other point in the episode, because inserting it here, especially with the surrounding dialogue, comes off very strange, because the dialogue we have is a literal line saying that she is non-binary because the Doctor is male, female, neither, and more. Because. what kind of implications are we putting here? That after Rose lets go of all of her Time Lord energy, she's no longer non-binary because it's only because of her connection to the Doctor? That's... I don't understand. I do also have an issue with another line from like later in the episode. The line where Rose says, "After all these years, I'm finally me." What do you mean by that? I need to know. Because once she's let go of the Time Lordness, who is she? We know Donna from before the meta-crisis. We met Rose in this episode. We've only known Rose as the meta-crisis has affected her. Once we end the episode, we have no idea who Rose Noble is anymore. Because from what we've been told, everything she is, basically, comes from the Doctor. Her memories of the aliens that she turns into toys, apparently her non-binary identity. What else? I have no idea. One thing that I think would have been really helpful for this episode is for them to have either a sensitivity reader. I know that TV shows are really fast-paced and like writing scripts is crazy, but having either a sensitivity reader or someone who identifies as trans and or non-binary in the writer's room. Because yes, Russell T Davies is a queer writer, but he is also a cisgender man. We cannot expect a queer cisgender man to understand the life of a trans non-binary woman of color, person of color. I don't know. Yeah, it's unreasonable, and this is how it goes. I don't think the episode is actively insensitive to Rose's identity, but it does by the end completely erase Rose's non-binary identity and possibly trans identity to service a male-presenting protagonist. Their words. This makes it feel like Rose is only in this episode to be a plot device instead of an actual character. Now, we're gonna dive into what I would change in the Star Beast to really give Rose Noble more character and make it more of a well-rounded story, I'd say, and one that doesn't totally like erase Rose's character in any way. I hope. The scene I'm gonna highlight first is one that I'd want to swap out for another scene. And this is a scene that we'd have between Rose and the Meep. And this would go in place of the, like, I don't even know how to describe it. The scene we get between Sylvia and Donna in the kitchen. Because I feel like that scene is really catering to a different audience than we really need to. And also, like, the later half of that scene is really repetitive of the recap we get at the beginning of the episode. So I feel like it's kind of unnecessary. Because of that, I'm gonna shift the focus over to Rose Noble and stick with her in the shed. This will give us a chance to learn more about Rose on her own. In this, it would show Rose struggling with knowing her own memories, and she would express the idea that she knows her identity, but she doesn't know, like, she can't sort her memories in a certain way. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with, like, the pieces all scattered. This would give a little hint to the meta-crisis effects, but wouldn't be a total hint because she doesn't actually say, like, what the other memories are. We would also get Rose expressing her non-binary identity earlier in the episode, so that we're not just kind of like, oh, she's non-binary. What? Huh? Hello? Where did that come from? Yeah, I'm not sure how, like, what kind of dialogue that would be, but it needs to be earlier. It needs to actually be said in a different way. I think it'd be kind of funny if it was to the Meep. Following this, it would be interesting to incorporate more hints at the metacrisis effects on Rose, with maybe her experiencing headaches and hinting that she has like chronic headaches or something, to really emphasize the prolonged effects that the metacrisis is having on her. Now, getting to the former non-binary reveal scene, I think like the later half of this scene can go. Because as I said, I do not like the whole idea of Rose's non-binary identity being tied to the Doctor in any way, because it makes it seem like it's just gonna go. We've established Rose's non-binary identity earlier in the episode in this rewrite, so we're good. Everything's fine. Instead of having that later part of the scene, I think it'd be really interesting if it played off of the scene we added in earlier, and having Rose be able to finally like separate her memories from the Doctor's memories. I'm like visualizing a kind of montage of the Doctor's memories, and then we see like memories from Rose's childhood or something, and then they're like completely shifted. Like everything is like ordered, it's like separated. I don't know, I think that'd be really cool. And then that like, it gives a nice nod that Rose is still her own person, and just because this has all been sorted out doesn't mean that she's losing who she is. And now we come to the Let It Go scene. The second most infamous scene of the episode. The sentiment of this scene is that women let go of their power and men couldn't possibly understand. And also they call out the Doctor for knowing nothing, which doesn't really make sense because all their knowledge came from him. Make it make sense, please? It does not make sense, Russell. In this version, the "I'm finally me" line would take on a different meaning, as Rose has now separated her memories from the Doctor's, and she still has her queer identity, because as we've established, she knows her identity separate from her memories. It's not the same thing. I don't feel that by the end of the episode they were treating Rose as a character in her own right, and that is not just a problem with representation, that's a problem with character writing in general. What is Doctor Who doing to me? What are they trying to do to me? Representation is an ongoing battle. And yes, we've made a lot of progress, but also, as we've seen in this episode, we're not done, guys. We have seen a lot more queer characters on screen, but we need to see that for what it is, the bare minimum. There are shows like Heartstopper that do it amazing, but then there's also other shows that do it real bad. So we just gotta keep creating, keep learning, keep being curious, and keep writing things that we want to see. Write the queer characters that you wish you had, and write them in a way that they are their own people. They're not just there to serve the plot. They are there to exist. They can just be. They can be characters. Fully. Flawed, happy, sad, all of the above. Angry, all of it. Experience all the emotions. Love them all. That is my conclusion for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave a like, leave a comment. If you have any other things I should talk about in relation to Doctor Who or fandom, the next video I'm doing is on While Blue Yonder, the second special. And I will most likely be doing one on the Giggle as well. So stick around for that, hit that subscribe button, and until next time, keep writing. Allons-y.